Hello PPL fans, I'm your host Luxanse here for you for our weekly power ranking segment. Last time I was here for PRs, I mentioned that week 4 would have all the analysts that do power rankings together again. However, unfortunately due to scheduling conflicts this week, we decided that it would be better for us to push back the group power rankings to next week. Our apologies for that, and I hope you can understand that this overall will be better, and I hope you can accept that it will be just me this week. I won't keep you waiting any longer, however, so let's go right into the actual power rankings. And at number 14, I have Nexus. Now, honestly, this week, Nexus had a pretty solid performance, all things considered. However, a loss is still a loss, and he's still winless, so I cannot justify putting him higher at this point in time. But I hope that this is a sign of things going better for Nexus for the rest of the season. Now, something I did really like about Nexus game from his side this week was that it felt like there was a clear game plan that he followed this week, whereas in previous weeks it kind of felt like he was doing whatever, going with the flow, which usually ended up in him making some weird like prioritization for his mons and stuff like that. I feel like this week he had a fairly solid game plan revolving around the Hisuian Typhlosion, trying to get that in as much as possible, click the overheat button, get a bunch of damage off, and try and force kills. And I think that overall was a fairly solid game plan. And as the game showed, it nearly worked out for him. Now, on the other side, the Baxcalibur was a massive issue. I think having some more to deal with that would have been better overall, like Intimidate Overquill, for example, would have been a good bring into it, but or having I don't know how physically defensive his Slowking was, but having it be more physically defensive if possible could have been really nice as well. Now, something else that I think could have been very good is Eruption on the Typhlosion, because as good as Overheat can be, Eruption is 100% accurate, and even after a Stealth Rock switch in, assuming that he Terra Fairies, or after a single spike, Eruption will still do more damage than Overheat will, and it'll be 100% accurate. Now, especially in that early game, if you can click Overheat or Eruption over and over, the Muck can't take 2, the Baxcalibur can't take a 150 base power overheat from Specs Typhlosion. At that point, you're good to just click Eruption over and over and over, practically. Now, the one stop to that is obviously the Yuxi, which did end up mitigating the Typhlosion quite a bit through Thunderwave. But overall, I think having Eruption to just be able to spam it really would have been very, very good for Nexus. Now, I can understand if you're worried about hazards that you can't really do that, but even then, if your plan is to lead it, those hazards don't matter nearly as much. So maybe having like Terra Blast, Eruption, Overheat if you still really want that extra damage, or like Fire Blast to have the more consistent damage as well. That could have been really good for Nexus with like a filler move as last move. Other than that, I think something to highlight as well is that his play around the Greninja was very solid. Having the Cryogonal be forced quite low through the backs, and pivoting around with the Slowking and the Terra Fairy Typhlosion was very solid to mitigate the Greninja. I think there was a slight optimization to be made in surfing it and not future sighting. Just to get down there, you can regen up the Slowking, and at that point you will be in a more favorable position later in the game, because the Cryogonal overall wasn't that useful I think throughout the game, just considering Q's theme, especially, or not Q, J's theme, my bad, considering that it was heavily built around that Baxcalibur. Overall though, as I said, not a bad performance from Nexus this week. I hope this is an upward trend. I really want to see him win a game. And following up with Nexus, we actually have another legacy coach, I would say, in Drew. And Drew is at the 13th spot just because I think, as opposed to Nexus, he had a very poor week this week. Getting spikes up with QtheCostaRican, good overall. Letting the QtheCostaRican go down and not having any way to keep those spikes up, not good overall. I think if you want to bring spikes and build a plan around that, you're going to have to find ways to keep those spikes up. Bring the Mismagius to spin block. Bring something that allows you to keep your QtheCostaRican for more than 2 turns. I think overall, Drew got exposed on a lot of things, like for example the Torkoal set. Bringing the same Torkoal set every week obviously is not great, and I think he got called out pretty hard on that with the superiority set. Now, on a specific scenario, I don't think it would have mattered that much, because the superiority set, even if he prepped the Torkoal for it, I don't think he would have been able to touch it. Because if you bring like Jan, you still get blocked by substitute, right? So overall for the game, for this game in particular, I don't think that mattered, but I think having that be called out and be out there is very dangerous, because people can just start prepping for that specific Torkoal set. And I do hope that leads into more set diversity for that Torkoal. Now, some of the prep that Drew brought was also a bit wonky in my opinion. The double AV was kind of wacky in my opinion, seeing as the Walking Wake and the Slitherwing don't really want to take hits from any of the special attackers on Uzi's team. I get that you can maybe live a hit because of him, but overall, wouldn't you rather just have a better answer to those mons, or play a more offensive game, play for sacks, and instead try and force your mons to be breakers more so, and get progress that way? Like for example, attack boosting Walking Wake would have been really solid here into the Vaporeon with like substitute and leftovers. The Vaporeon doesn't have great ways to break sub for a Walking Wake. It has like Ice Beam, which if you're somewhat bulky in Spadef, the Vaporeon can't really do anything. You can't Hydro Steam it, but you can spam Dragon Pulse. You can Draco it potentially, or like Dragon Pulse into Draco. I don't know if that kills from the top of my head, but I think there's a lot of options there that could have worked out, and I don't think double AV was the play. Like the Slitherwing, if you're mainly wanting to switch that in on like the Iron Treads, for example, which seemed like it was the idea, I don't think you'd want to have AV. I feel like you'd want to have Morning Sun if anything, so you can come in the Iron Treads multiple times rather than come in once. Granted, the crit was unfortunate, but you can come in once, and then suddenly it's not switching anymore because you can't actually come in repeatedly. So I think overall the prep was suboptimal in that way. The Sui and Sliggoo was another one of those, in my opinion. Definitely a bring of all time. As I mentioned, I think the Mismagius could have been really good here just to keep up the spikes. Shadow Ball is relatively spammable against Uzi's team as well, seeing as he only has the Zoroark as a resist. Well, he does have Dark Belief as well, but you get Mystical Fire here, and you can Calm Mind, stuff like that as well. So I think his Ghost Resists are fairly abusable with the Mismagius, and having that spin blocker would have been nice. Alternatively, I think Scovillain and Sun was very threatening for Uzi's team. Having the Grass and Fire move kind of covered everything except for the Regidrago, but I think, again, a sub Leech Seed Scovillain could have been very solid, seeing as Regidrago has a enormous HP stat. I think having the ability to force the Leech Seed onto that with sub and just stalling it out would have been very good. He has nothing else that can really come in on the Scovillain clicking like actual attacks like the Sneasler, which can break the sub with U-turn. It doesn't want to directly come in, so it can force a kill in that scenario. which would have been really good for Drew. Now, at the number 12 spot, we have Lars, aka elscizor. I think that Lars had a really good lead with the Florges, being able to chip the Thundy, and also killing the Iron Moth was very good. However, I think that he more so played himself, if anything, rather than that he got outplayed by Q. The fumble around the Meloetta was really tough. Trading your cleaver response for a singular U-turn on the Meloetta was not great. Especially considering that the Meloetta kind of did whatever it wanted for several turns, thus not making use of that bit of damage that the U-turn did. I think you could have easily scouted with the Florges, go for a Moonblast, go for Synthesis, for example, to see what this Meloetta wants to do, and then use either the Talonflame or a combination of the Talonflame and the Azelf, maybe the Roaring Moon to pivot as well, to force chip on this thing and then kill it with the Roaring Moon, because the Roaring Moon felt very important as an offensive piece, and just using it for damage with Ironhead, I think overall is not great. I think if you can kill the Meloetta with the Roaring Moon, you're in a very good position to win the end game at that point. So overall, that's quite unfortunate, so to say, but it is what it is. Not much more to say about that. I think maybe if you really worry about setup Meloetta a lot in prep, then you could bring like a Trick Florges as well, but I think the play that ended up happening was pretty suboptimal from Lars, and I do hope to see him bounce back next week. Now, next up, at number 11, we have Ellie. Now, Ellie actually had a really solid week for herself, taking down one of the 3-0 coaches in the league, being Mephisto. I think the double Iron Bundle lure with Hydra and Rotom both having Yachi was very solid. The anti-Trick Room Hariyama doubling as a check to Bundle and Chew was really nice, and she never really lit up the momentum for this week. I think she overall played a more aggressive game, just trying to weed out what Mephisto wanted to do, in a sense. It was more aggro without actually being aggressive, which I think worked better than the very reactive style that I've seen from her in the last few games. So I definitely think that props should be given to her for that. There were a few bits of luck, like the U-turn on the low kicks towards the end of the battle with Hydra, or the Gunk Shot poison with Room on the slow bro. But overall, I think she overstated how much they actually mattered. I don't think they mattered nearly as much as she said they did. At least not enough for the game to convincingly go into Mephisto's favor. Maybe it would have been closer, maybe he could have snuck out a W if she didn't play optimally. But overall, I think she played fairly well this week. And I hope she keeps up the momentum going into next week and the weeks to follow. Now, at the number 10 slot, kind of had to keep them as a pair, but we have Jack to complement Ellie at 11. Now, I think Jack's game plan got hard throttled by the Espeon lead. Wanting to get up the hazards with Mew is a good game plan, assuming that the best spinner in the game and the Magic Bounce user, and probably one of the better defoggers in the game, are not present on the opponent's team. Now, I do think hazards could have been good, like forcing the Tusk to take a Toxic Spike would have been good, but I think the Mew need to be prepped better for a potential Espeon lead, if you want to do that. Because in the end, the fact that the Mew got throttled definitely showed throughout the game, especially considering the Tinglu set. I think any other Tinglu set might have been better, seeing as you did not have a great way to pivot or to pressure the Espeon. You didn't have a great way to pressure the Jolteon either. So what does the Tinglu actually do at that point, right? Now, it was unfortunate that it took a crit, but in the end, yeah, it's unfortunate, but also, if the Tinglu could actually do something to the Espeon that is relevant, it would have mattered a lot more, I think. Because getting the Sand Tomb damage off, yeah, that's cool. But overall, like, it doesn't really do anything. Later as well, I think sacking the Inteleon might have been a misplay. Even if he goes for the Hyper Voice and can 2-hit KO you from that range with the Jolteon, you can at least grab a free switch into Decidueye for it. Because I think that Choice Specs might have been... well, you could at least scout the damage, and if it's Choice Specs, you can go into Decidueye. If it's not Choice Specs, then... and the Tinglu still gets 2-hit KO'd, and it's forced to click Hyper Voice on the Tinglu anyway to kill it. So I think that would have been better. I think while the Inteleon wasn't great, the Inteleon can at least force damage on something, whereas the Tinglu doesn't really have value outside of checking the Jolteon at that point in the game. Thunderbolt is a 0-risk play when the Tinglu is at, like, I think it was like 100 HP out of like 450, because that one has a ridiculous HP stat. When it has like that low health and the other 3 Mons in the back are Grey Tusk, Azumarill, and Zarude, I don't think the Tinglu should be preserved to not switch into the Jolteon, if anything. However, I'm sure Jack will bounce back in no time, so it is what it is. At the number 9 slot, I have Q, and I already mentioned this when I was talking about Lars, but I feel like Q mainly... I don't think Q necessarily outplayed Lars. I feel like it was more so Lars outplayed himself trying to deal with the Meloetta rather than Q making some insane reads and stuff like that. Overall, he did get a little bit lucky with the Meloetta against the Talonflame as well, but other than that, that Meloetta set kind of hard farmed. Could have maybe played it a bit safer versus like the Talonflame when you have 4 Mons still in the back, or like 3 Mons still in the back that you can utilize. But overall, it was a solid game from Q. There's not much to say since the Meloetta was essentially the only Mon that came out. But as I said, it felt more like Lars outplayed himself trying to deal with this Meloetta rather than some insane plays from Q, which is why he is this low. He would have probably been higher on like a different week, but I think a lot of people stepped up this week as well, which doesn't help his ranking, obviously. Now, at the number 8 slot, I have Envy, and what can I say? The Heat Lord got burned. Envy's prep was decent enough, but he really did get a taste of his own medicine. In the post-match interview with Joey, or Pokemon, he did point out that going Meow first after the Ursaluna was better to try and get the knock and reduce the chance to get the quick draw, quick claw off. But I think going Meow first even before the Ursaluna would have been better overall, because if you can get the knockoff on that turn, then your Ursaluna also has a chance to get the or to outspeed rather than having the quick draw or the quick claw activate. Only issue with that would have been Policy plus Trick Room, but at that stage, any Mon on MV's team would have activated Weakness Policy. Like, the Ursaluna would have clicked Earthquake on the Slowbro every single time. The Gooter would have clicked Earthquake on the Slowbro every single time. So there was no stopping that at that point. But I think if you see last Mon G Slowbro, you have to go Meowscarada first to go for the knock. Because in the end, if he had gone that knock and reduced the chance, he could have won that game. However, going Ursaluna first and letting the Slowbro just set up the +2 to immediately get the kill on Ursaluna and Goodra in the end was not ideal. I think the Ursaluna makes sense in theory since it's the bulkiest one you have, but at that point, last mon G Slowbro should be an obvious quick draw quick claw Slowbro, if not policy trick room. But as I said, policy trick room, other than like getting every pivot right, doesn't have like an actual answer on MV's team at that point in the game. Now at the number 7 spot, I have SK. SK had some solid prep this week, especially with the Espeon, putting in a lot of work. The Terra Fairy Espeon, as I've mentioned when talking about Jack's team, completely throttled his game plan, resulting in him essentially playing off the back foot for the entire game. SK did not seem worried at all that game. Sea Booster Tusk for the immediate boost while not being locked in was a very solid bring as well. Scarf Jolteon was a good revenger for a lot of Jack's team and showed. And as I said, the Terra Espeon just kind of farmed. There's not much else to say, similar to the game between Q and Lars. It was mainly Jack getting throttled by one specific mon, not prepping adequately for it, rather than SK making some insane reads or outplays. His game plan was solid, and there's not much else to say about it other than good shit, keep it up. At number 6, I have Uzi, who is a new coach, obviously. It's been mentioned more than enough already, so I won't go into it more than I need. However, he overall played fairly safe, and mainly benefited from Drew not playing very well, as I mentioned before. I think if I'm going to nitpick a little bit, some of the EVing for the mons I saw on the team builder was suboptimal, like 96 HP Regidrago. Sounds okay in theory, but investing it into bulk is 9, or well, not even 9, it's 10 times out of 10 on Regidrago, just a better option. You need less invest, you can invest more into specifics and probably get a bit bulkier even by investing 96 into specific stats. Now, flinching the Sliggoo was a bit unfortunate for Drew, obviously, but I don't think it mattered whatsoever with the damage that Ice Spinner was doing. And catching onto Drew's prep was very good with the Cerulege set and bringing that for the Cinderace and the Torkoal. As I said, Uzi played fairly safe. He didn't really let Drew get a chance to play his game, mainly while not taking overly like big risks or anything, or going for weird plays to scout stuff out. I think overall he played very solid, and there's not much more to say about that. At the number 5 slot, I have Joey PokemonMD. I think he had a very solid performance against MV with some really cool prep, as we all saw, with the triple final gambit. And style points for not allowing your opponent to get a kill. That is some massive disrespect, but I really think that's funny. Only reason he didn't move up, honestly, is that I think other people stepped up big time. And I can't really justify putting him above the people that I have above him. I just said the same thing twice, whatever. Since he did get a little bit lucky with the quick draw, quick claws, it is still a 44% chance, and he got it on the turn he needed. Which, well, yeah, that's good. It is still a bit lucky, right? So I don't think I can put him over some of the other performers of this week. Now at the number 4 slot, I have the Don. I have Mephisto. It's not his best performance, gotta say. Trick Room versus Diancie Hariyama is a bit interesting. Copper would do okay in theory versus those in just getting off raw damage, but between Washtome and Lando T, I don't think Copper's going to do a whole lot. I personally would have liked to see a game plan more focused about getting in Bundle, if anything. Because Bundle really just clicked the button in that matchup, with Frostmoth being the only like real switch into it, other than like Hariyama. You can really really get creative with it to get in this bundle as often as possible. Just click a button as often as possible. Stuff like eject pack, overheat Chiyu, bait out the Diancie, bait out the Hariyama, get in low kicks or Iron Bundle, like getting into low kicks on the Hariyama, clicking banded U-turn with Terra Bug. That's gonna force it out. It's gonna bring in the Lando. Boom, you have bundling. Amazing. You couldn't just cycle stuff like that, or eject button slowbro to get in from the Lando as well. Lando clicks U-turn against the slowbro. Oh, eject button, now the bundle's in, and it forces a kill. I think that would have been very nice for Mephisto, but overall, he'll bounce back. We've seen his week 1 through 3. He'll do fine anyway. So, as I said, not his best performance this week, but he'll bounce back for sure. At the number 3 slot, I have jayvee, who I think had a solid week this week. Banded backs is really strong. Who would have thought? Now, despite not having a single real pivot into Typhlosion, some suboptimal prep or play that I already pointed out from Nexus with Eruption, stuff like that, for example, gave him opportunity to find an out through T-Wave Yuxi, which overall jayvee sees that opportunity very well, so props to him for that. I think getting up spikes towards the latter half of the mid game as well with the Orthworm, to force chip on the Valiant, to force the trade with backs after Sandstorm, Life Orb, and spikes was a really smart. And I think that was a very good play at that point in the game. Going Gren on the Cryo was quite sus, however, seeing as Nexus could easily recover once or twice even with the Cryo to see what Jay was going to do with the back caliber. Since Icicle Crash was doing about half, you can recover that back, and then if he goes out into something else, you get all your health back essentially. You can also miss an Icicle Crash, and at that point you're in a really good spot as well. Unless the Cryo had no speed, obviously, or the backs had no speed, then also works. But if the Cryo has no speed and the backs has max speed, then yeah, don't do that, obviously. But at that point, you can get back to full. You can force chip on the Gren, which would make the Typhlosion Slowking versus Greninja interaction a lot easier for Nexus, even though Nexus ended up playing it very well. Overall, though, solid week from jayvee. I think the Terra Ghost Earthworm once again proving that it's fairly solid as well, putting in go work for him. And overall, as I said, solid performance. Now, at week 2, I have Addison. And I think Addison had some cool techs versus mountaih with the Endure Red Card Gambit and Terra Water Go-Go, but ultimately, long term, she fell short. I think it was still very solid prep and play, and that's why it doesn't have why she doesn't have a massive drop in her ranking. And I expect her to continue the strong performances overall, but I think that mountaih just had a read on what she was going to do, and honestly just played incredibly well despite not having particularly interesting sets to mention it like that, I would say. And at the number 1 slot, kind of goes hand in hand with Addison since they played against each other. It's mountaih. As I said, he brought relatively standard prep this week, but if it's not broken, don't fix it. If something is... I think this is a trap that a lot of new Draft League players fall into. Yeah, it is a counter prep format, but if something standard is really good against your opponent, just bring something standard, man. Even if they can prep for it, that doesn't mean that they can't answer it. Say in this game, for example, mountaih noticed that Garchomp had a very good matchup. Earthquake was fairly spammable. No need to bring a weird Garchomp set. Just bring SD, 2 attacks, spikes. There you go. You have your set. And I think overall, yes, prep was fine, but he played very well, and had Addison on the back foot for a good portion of the game, despite the text that Addison brought. Now, that will do it for this week's power rankings. Please, if you do disagree with anything, as per usual, leave it down in the comments below. We love to have discussions with you guys, even if I haven't had the chance to, for the most part. But please do leave it in the comment section down below. We love to see your feedback. And we'll see you guys next time.